Good morning, everyone. Please take your seats. We're ready to get started. Please take your seats. It's past 10:30 at this point. It's all right. We got time. um, okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Abhishek Mathur, and I'm one of the board members of Houston Oasis, the nonprofit. And welcome to Houston Oasis, Houston's very own secular community. Uh, we're glad you're here, and would like to get started on our Sunday. And the first up, we're going to do two songs by Jes Schneider, and then we're going to go to the main talk by Rabinowitz, and then we'll take a break and then come back for Q&A, and we'll do some song at the end. Okay, first, Jes Schneider is based in Houston, Texas, and he's going to delight us all this morning. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Wait a month and then you'll see. As I remind you of it's me. 100 different little ways to wrap your head around and say, wait a month and then you'll see. In the middle of the night, as I look down, I wonder why. If my future is looking bright, I'm just trying to live my life, but I doubt I do it right. We go up, down, every town, everybody's coming out. Yeah, we sing songs outbound, watching that body move around. Just take your time and watch your life with different strokes and different lights. Every night you take the bird, take it all and twist and turn it. When you walk, shift and fall, get back up, it's time to cry. Don't you ever give on up, it's time to be some more. From the future I see you. Yeah, I'm seeing all your moves, and I'm liking what you do. Can I wait till you see too? When there's nothing left to prove, now we're looking from afar. No one let at you be a star. We all have our ups and downs, different smiles and some frowns. A lot of people in their doubts. We go up, down, every town, everybody's coming out. Yeah, we sing songs outbound, watching that body move around. Just take your time and watch your life with different strokes and different lights. Every night you take the bird, take it all and twist and turn it. When you walk, you trip and fall, get back up, it's time to cry. Don't you ever give on up, it's time to be some more. Up, down, every town, everybody's coming out. Yeah, we sing songs outbound, watching that body move around. Just take your time and watch your life, the different strobes and different lights. Every night you take the bird, take it all and twist and turn. And when you walk, you trip and fall, get back up, it's time to cry. Don't you ever give on up, it's time to be someone. Hey, thank you.
Thanks, Jess. We'll be back for more. I'd like to introduce Aaron Rabinowitz, our main speaker today. He's a lecturer in philosophy at Rutgers University and hosts the Embrace the Void and Philosophers in Space podcasts. The title of today's talk is The Secular Paradox, Challenges for Community Organizing Among Non-Believers. And I'm looking forward to this talk. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you all for having me back. I was here a year ago. As you can imagine, ethicists don't get a lot of repeat invites, so I appreciate it. Especially for those of you who remember last year's talk. Threw a lot at you on that one. This one will unfortunately be no different. But I think we're all going to be on the same page here a lot, because we're going to ultimately be talking about community as a way to have shared values, and I think that's something that's really important to Oasis. I want to talk specifically about some research that I was doing recently as part of a paper that I was writing about the marginalization of secular individuals, the way they are stereotyped as being unethical or untrustworthy, and why a lot of people, maybe people in this room, feel like they have to hide their non-believer status in various communities and spaces because you rightly recognize that some people will not trust you as much as a result. While doing that research, I came upon this book that really brought together a lot of things that I see happen when community organizers in secular spaces try to provide different things for different non-believers. Often there is a lot of anxiety and sometimes pushback when trying to provide things like rituals or a shared set of values. And I think Joseph, who's a great guy, highly recommend both the book, even though you may find parts of it frustrating, and a conversation I had with him on Embrace the Void, which I think was far less frustrating. I have a slightly different interpretation of the paradox than he does, but I think he really puts together a lot of good evidence that is really about our communities, and Oasis gets a reference in the book as well. He did a lot of really good research within our communities observing this kind of discomfort. So in order to set this up, I want to start with a little bit of like secular history and just get a sense of the room and see how much people understand about movement secularism and attempts to try to turn disbelief into something more than that. In the beginning, yes. How many of you all are familiar with the fact that within secularism in the past 10-ish years at least, let's say, there's been what I'll call a social justice schism? That there are, within communities, fights over issues around social justice and whether social justice belongs in our secular spaces. Show of hands, who knows what I'm talking about here? Okay. Let me also ask this. That's okay. How many of y'all have any understanding or recollection of this phrase? Atheism plus. Does that mean anything to anybody? Okay. Here's our lifers. This is deep lore for your community, so this will be valuable for you. Round about the early 2010s, as a response to new atheism, which is the broad umbrella term for your Sam Harris, Dawkins, Four Horsemen, early 2000s reaction to the high religiosity of the war on terror. In the early 2010s, you have a group of individuals in these communities who come together and essentially say, you know, we want our atheist communities to be about more than just disbelief in God. Yes, none of us believe in God, but we want something else too, and hence the plus, right? This was met with some resistance. Atheism plus did not go over well for a variety of reasons. Here's just one example from a Twitter handle from that time, circa 2013 or so. I'll read this out, it's a little fuzzy. Atheism plus, a bunch of frauds. Despite having atheism in its name, it really isn't atheism. Their goal is to subvert atheism with hard feminist indoctrination. I am fairly confident I know who's the person behind this. He'll show up later in the talk. So what's going on here? What is causing this reaction to atheism plus? Is it patriarchy? Absolutely, 100%. Is it a kind of obsession with a very masculine-coded rationalism? Very much so, totally. But it's also the secular paradox, I think. There is a genuine discomfort within our communities. Now, this is not actually a paradox. It's a bit of I think Joseph at various points uses some clickbaity kind of language, and I'm sympathetic in a variety of ways. But it's not a paradox, and thankfully, because paradoxes are a pain, they're terrible. So for example, this sentence is false is a paradox. Don't think about it too much, okay? Just look away after a while. It's not worth it, I promise you. What we have here is something that's more related to this, which might get a different kind of laugh from you, right? This is a joke. Is atheism a religion is like one of your top 5 annoying things that somebody will throw at you that you then have to spend several hours disabusing them of, right? But What I do think is very real is an anxiety within ourselves, within the secular community, about being too religious or doing things that feel religious-y, essentially. And that this anxiety makes us resistant to a bunch of essential parts of community organizing. Joseph talks about a variety of topics within his particular book. I want to just focus on 3 that I think are going to be near and dear to everyone in this particular community. So that's going to be rituals, beliefs, and values. I think all of these are essential for community, but depending on your experiences of religion prior to becoming or while never being a believer, you will somewhat naturally associate certain things with religion. Now, I'm here to tell you, there is a whole big debate about the definition of religion. Y'all are probably familiar. Weirdly enough, for once, as a philosopher, I'm not going to get into it because it's not important in this particular conversation, because this isn't about the actual definition of religion. This is about your internal anxieties about what feels religious. It's a separate psychological issue. In my personal opinion, you can go through the whole arc of like religion is about belief in something supernatural. No, it's really about rituals. No, it's really about meaning. No, it's really actually just about belief in supernatural. It just comes back around at the end of the circle. That's where it ends. So, as long as you're not doing something that involves appeals to the supernatural, there's nothing religious to it. But it will feel that way. And even if you don't like that definition, even if you think that definition is too Western, too focused on doxastic traditions that are all about belief or not belief, it doesn't matter, because what we want to help you understand is that like it is okay to have these things. So why do we have this anxiety, right? Rituals is where I want to start, because your community, I think, probably understands this anxiety most acutely. When I say rituals here, I mean it very broadly. I mean, in deference to our high church friends, smells and bells, right? Your musics, your dancing, your nice foods and incense and all sorts of things like that. Like the stuff that makes a place feel essentially not sterile. And I think what we see is that there are communities within the secular broader movement that specifically cater to the kind of smells and bells vibe, and one of them is Oasis, another one being Sunday Assembly. The two of y'all are referenced in the book, as I mentioned, as 2 examples of communities that are doing the opposite of what other communities are doing in secular world, which is actively pushing values and other things like this to the forefront, and not having it just be sort of disbelief in God. And Joseph says in the book that like, we don't know how well that's going to work out yet, which is fair. We're still working on this, right? But like, there's some optimism that there could be an approach there. And this is good because, like I said, I think without that stuff, our communities can often feel very sterile. It feels like debate club, and like you can only hear the same arguments so many times before it's just not that interesting anymore, and you want something else. And I think what we often see as secular organizers is, especially if you're coming from a very bad religious place, there's an understandable period of anger and dunking and wanting to like see people owned, right? But eventually that mellows into a desire for social advocacy and social justice and community organizing and work with, service work. So I think that is good, that we have these spaces where people can kind of mature in their resistance to our broader religious culture. This is also, I think, really valuable because the alternative is kind of non-inclusive. And this is like a tricky topic, but there's some evidence that individuals, people of color who are non-believers, have a particularly hard time in debate club world kind of secular spaces that feel waspy, for lack of a better term, right? They feel very repressed, and like you can't be sort of as expressive. Again, we don't want to paint with super broad brushes, but if you look at like American Atheist has done a lot of studies about marginalization of specifically people of color who are non-believers. This is a very common refrain, that they don't feel like this is the right kind of space for them in this way. So I think it is valuable to have all of that as part of your community. Now let's talk about beliefs. This is where things get messy for kind of everybody. And I think a lot of atheists or non-believers are sort of in conflict in their own heart about this, centered around the question of knowledge versus dogma, right? We want to have certain beliefs, but we don't want to feel like we're being too dogmatic about it. And we get real awkward about it as a result. And in Joseph's book, there's some really great quotes where people are like, what do you believe? Well, I believe this, but I don't really, but I do, but I'm not a believer, I'm a non-believer. But that is a position, but it's not, right? It's genuine internal, I think, cognitive dissonance, because we feel like if we just say we believe something really strongly, then maybe we're religion after all, which is you're not. Right? Like, as a philosopher who believes a lot of things very strongly, it's not being religious to do that, it's just being annoying. What this leads to in a lot of secular spaces is a kind of minimalism about beliefs. It's just not God, and don't have too much conversations even about what that means, because then it gets really messy. You just sort of want to just say, that's it, that's all, and this is a kind of a big tent approach where you're trying to bring in as many non-believers as possible by not putting any other qualifiers or requirements on them being part of the community. And I am sympathetic, but I think it actually doesn't work. Even if you do just want a biggest tent possible, by not having conversations about things like beliefs and values, you exclude people from your community. For example, is being an anti-vaxxer necessarily related to being an atheist or not? Sort of, but not really. There's some interesting connections having to do with magical thinking and anti-vaxxer conspiracism that I can happily talk about afterwards, but broadly speaking, they are separate things. But I also don't want to be in community with people who aren't vaccinated. Like, it's just, especially if there's children involved, like, it's a really important issue, and I think that it's okay for a community to say, in keeping with our values, which I'll talk about in a second, we hold to certain beliefs. And we do this all the time, right? We always start talking about how we are science-driven and, like, evidence-driven. What are you being evidence-driven towards, if not towards certain beliefs about the world that, to some extent, you have to expect your fellow community members to believe in? Like, I'll talk about this one more when we get to some examples of statements of values in secular communities. But the other impact of this is a kind of uncertainty game that I think is crippling our epistemology a bit as secular individuals. And I would point to examples of things like street epistemology, which I've gone round and round with quite a few times. I say this knowing that probably some of you in this room like street epistemology and think that it's doing good work. And I think that to some extent it is, and to some extent it causes problems. This is just a system of Socratic dialogue for folks who are not familiar, that some folks have taken up as an approach to helping people have less certainty about their beliefs. It really does kind of originate as a dunking game, if we're being honest, for non-believers to, like, film conversations with believers where they ask them questions about, like, what would reduce your belief in God, and the person says nothing, and everybody laughs. But it has kind of tried to evolve into a system of helping people be less confident in their beliefs, again, because of this, I think, deeply rooted fear of dogma. Even the things that I believe very highly, I'm not going to say I believe them with absolute certainty. Yeah, there's always something that could disprove my beliefs. No, there isn't. Like, there's nothing that should undermine your belief in evolution. There's no hypothetical you can put forward in which you actually should stop believing in evolution. That's just the way the accrual of knowledge works, and that's good. This is all a problem that has to do with John Stuart Mill that I'm just not going to go that far into. But the problem that it leads to is things like, I think, higher risks of conspiracism. If you are reactionary in this way towards what you perceive as dogma, that can end up being reactionary towards what you perceive as culturally informed conventional wisdom about, again, things like vaccines or culture war issues. So, for example, the guy who coined the phrase street epistemology, some of you might know who he is, Peter Boghossian. He was a very famous atheist organizer for a time and still is in certain circles, but now also spends his time on television channels that are run by far-right cult conspiracy organizations. Falun Gong, the Chinese cult, runs Epoch Times, and he goes and talks to them about how America is collapsing because of transhumanism and feminism and stuff like that. So when you have this kind of reactionary position to general knowledge, it does, I think, potentially put you at higher risk of sliding into those reactionary places more broadly. But I should also note the problem that they were experiencing, Boghossian and other folks who splintered off from other atheist groups during the past 10 years, isn't just fighting over beliefs, it's really fighting over values, okay? And this is where I come in. As the ethicist, it's my job to fight over values. Here's me fighting over values with Justin Vacula, who I'm not 100% sure is the person who had that atheism plus thing at the beginning, but given how much he hates feminism, it seems very likely. Here's me debating him on social justice and whether it's good for the atheist community. And I would recommend going and watching that video. He will lay out a lot of the arguments that I've been talking about here about how atheism is just about God or not God. That we don't want to have those other things. We want to have a big tent where everybody, can come in and be excited. So it's ethics versus dogma all over again. And I should note, his particular fear is feminist, left-wing dogma. That's the concern here. To be very clear, here's just one of the comments which you should never read under the YouTube video, but someone pointed it out to me, and it felt so good that I just had to put it in here. If Aaron wants to glue his personal beliefs to an ideology, it should be his own ideology, his brand, his label, his reputation on the line, not an existing ideology. He claims he doesn't want to be in a group with people who do not share his exact beliefs on every issue. He can leave at any time. Atheism needs only share beliefs on a narrow religious topic and no other topics. Subtext, he wants to hijack your members and indoctrinate them into his cult to be clones of him, unthinking, unquestioning, under his authority. Half right, I do want to indoctrinate you into my cult. It is an ironic cult, though, so it's... which again is me dealing with my own stresses about these issues. So this is very common. If you start saying you want to have a set of values and maybe a code of conduct that goes with that set of values that is enforced in such a way where people actually don't cause harm to each other in a variety of things like, inappropriately constantly hitting on members of the community who don't want that, which is one of the things that Justin was very mad that we have tried to outlaw. What you get instead is essentially a kind of value nihilism, right? You're a community of nihilists. You believe in nothing, which is not good. We could call this big tent nihilism if we want, right? To go along with the other sort of big tent view, the idea is I would rather be friends with an atheist Nazi and have them be part of my community than not. And I think the answer to that should be no. A community, I would argue, necessarily involves shared values. You all have shared values, whether you acknowledge them or not. You all value reason, as we'll talk about in a second, for example. But if people don't value the well-being of other members of their community because, for example, they don't believe that transgender is a thing, then they're not safe people to be around, and people will notice that and not come to your communities. So if you want an inclusive community, you need to make clear that people can be their authentic selves, and anyone who says otherwise will be removed. And to y'all's credit, that is one of your core values, as we'll look at in just a second. If you're not going the nihilist route, a lot of folks these days have moved towards what they call secular humanism. This is a sort of broad values tradition coming out of some ancient traditions that attempts to sort of do secular ethics, okay? And I would say it's gone all right. And I say that because I think my analysis is there's not a lot of ethicists in the movement, which is weird. If you think about the new atheists and that big movement and drawing in of people, it was led by two scientists, a journalist, and a philosopher. And the philosopher was the least involved and didn't really come out strongly about ethics at all because his ethics are not the best. Sorry, may he rest in peace. So So, for example, the 10 Commitments. This is your American Humanist Association's sort of statement of values. Often a lot of communities draw from this. And I want to say, look, it is better to have this than not. And I bring this up because y'all are already kind of on board with the let's have values in the community. So I want to take us a step farther and talk about what it means to be honest about interrogating those values and maybe sometimes updating and revising them to make them modern or more inclusive, that kind of thing. So the 10 Commitments, which were written, I think, 20 years ago at this point, bears one of the problems of value statements, which is starting probably with a gimmick. I think they probably started with 10 commandments and felt like they needed to find 10 things. And your statement of values probably doesn't need to be 10 values long. I don't know that there are 10 core values that are worth putting on a list like this. So what instead you get is a mix of values and practices, let's say, right? So empathy, humility, altruism, those might be values, but environmentalism, peace and social justice, service and participation, those are practices. They follow from your values. They are what you should be doing based on your values. I don't know how much they were literally just trying to make this a statement of values, but these are the sort of things that, like, as community organizers, you want to be able to make it very clear, here are our values and here's how they are going to inform our behavior in this code of conduct, and not sort of have those things kind of run together and not make it clear which values are prioritized when there are conflicts. Other things that I would update here would be, I would change empathy to compassion because of modern changes about the discourse around that language. You'll get a lot of pushback from certain individuals who read a Paul Bloom book 10 years ago, but they didn't read all of it. Like humility, I would probably change to gratitude because of the awkwardness for some people around the idea of humility. Altruism, I would probably drop entirely because it's really just an extra version of what you're supposed to be getting from empathy or compassion. And like altruism is really not always the best method for doing ethical activities, especially volunteering, because it leads to compulsive self-sacrificing, which leads to burnout. So instead of altruism, what you want is reciprocal community, where you help the community and the community helps you. And that's, you can expect that of your community. You should expect that of your community. It's a good thing. And this is where atheists never get, or ethicists never get invited back, because we always have to be honest with our friends. I also want to talk about y'all's values, which I love. I think y'all are like on the right track. Here is where I want to get like fine-grained about language and just help think about, like, to what extent do these values reflect a certain period of atheist thinking and could be shifted or updated to some extent. So when I look at these, I look at them in order like every human being in this part of the world, left to right. So if you care about certain things more than others, you really got to think about that in how you align and lay out your values. So here, there are 5 values, 3 of which I wouldn't touch at all. Meaning comes from making a difference, I think is great, because what you are trying to offer as a community is meaning making and purpose. And that comes from making a difference, absolutely. Human hands solve human problems. That's a really good description of humanism. It's a really good answer to the question of why humanism is, because what we mean is these are human problems and humans are the only ones who exist that are going to fix them. Be accepting and be accepted. That's a very inclusive way of putting it, and I think it's wonderful. The other 2, I think, I want to look at them and think about what are they potentially conveying to some people that you don't mean to convey. So people are more important than beliefs. What I think is going on there is what I've been talking about this whole time, right? The secular paradox about beliefs. We don't want to feel dogmatic, and to prove that, here's the description from the website. Throughout history, beliefs, dogmas, and ideologies have divided people and have been the source of wars, persecution, as well as strife within families and friendships. The Oasis movement values the well-being of people over any belief, dogma, theology, or philosophy. Our common humanity is enough to bind us in meaningful community. And yes, we are aware of this is also a belief, but we're just fine with a little irony in our lives. Do you hear the cognitive dissonance? Right? Yeah, it's a belief. It's not just a belief, it's a value, right? You are saying we value being kind to human beings above certain litmus tests for being part of our community. But maybe it goes too far a little bit, right? When you say any philosophies, you probably don't mean we're cool with having Nazis in our community, but if you spend a lot of time online and dealing with these issues in these spaces, that can read that way to a lot of people, especially when it's coupled with the second one, Reality is known through reason. Which again, I am not unsympathetic. I understand what you are saying here. Most religions claim to have special insights into the nature of reality on the basis of revelation. As a secular movement, the Oasis community are committed to exploring and understanding reality on the basis of empirical evidence and rational discourse. This is a very early 2000s atheist way of talking about, not being dogmatic, but having beliefs and understanding. If you read it, though, it reads as exclusionary to some people, because there are other ways you can know reality. You can know reality through music and dance and intuitions and emotions and, modeling of behavior by other people and expertise and, knowledge that you have not worked through yourself, because there's way too much to know in the world. So, while I'm sympathetic to this, and I understand that it feels good as a punchline for people in the community who have dealt with people who have appealed to magic knowledge in their head to explain why it's okay to be abusive towards someone. I am sympathetic and I get that. It's an issue of when you're talking to one community in one way, are you signaling to another community in another way that their approach to things or their experiences are not going to be valued? Are you signaling that this is going to be another kind of debate club vibe environment? So I don't say all of this with an answer or a solution to any of these issues. I bring this forward just to sort of help y'all thinking as a community, are we conveying exactly what we want to be conveying with our values, which are, in my opinion, very good values. So just to wrap up, here's just one more to compare it to. This is the statement of values we developed for the Creator Accountability Network, which is a nonprofit that I'm the ethics director for, that is trying to help communities centered around content creation have values and codes of conduct that are enforceable. And I just want to highlight that having a statement of values, you want it to do a couple of things. You want it to signal to people what is important to you and what priorities those things are. So just like left to right, you go top to bottom here, we prioritize care and equity because we're a restorative justice organization. What we are really here to do is prevent harm to community members and prevent injustice to community members. And we're going to do that through the values of trust, integrity, expertise, and liberty. And we want to make clear that we do care about liberty, even though sometimes it will come into conflict with care. If you have a code of conduct, some people might feel that violates their liberty. That was one of the big arguments in the schism about movement atheism, was literally having a code of conduct violates my freedom to flirt with literally anyone I want to at any meeting, is mostly what the conversation boiled down to. I don't think that it actually violates your freedom because, like I said earlier, having that system allows people to be their authentic selves and live in community more collectively. But even if it did cause a conflict, we would prioritize care and equity. And I think that is something that y'all do as well. That's what y'all mean when y'all say prioritizing people over beliefs. You mean we're going to care about a person. We're going to be compassionate towards them no matter their beliefs. We may not want to be in community with them, but it doesn't mean that we have to be horrible to them. And then things like trust, integrity, and expertise are the ways that we build our ability to protect people. But even with expertise, we have to be very careful and clarify that expertise is meant something more broadly than just credentialed, academic expertise. It means lived experience. It means, intuitive understanding that community members develop by living in these worlds for these long periods of time. All of this is just to say, even if you've all come together and agreed that we want to have shared values, it can still be a ongoing, ethics is a lifelong process, right? It's not something you've solved. It's something that continues to evolve as our understanding evolves. And so as a community of values, by evolving those things, you can then help people feel less anxious about having those values while being atheists, right? Because to bring this all back, what really matters here is you want people to come in and feel safe and not feel like this is actually just another cult or a religion or something like that, right? And the more you can talk about why we have these values, what they mean very simply for how we're going to treat each other and what this experience is going to be like, and how that has nothing to do with being religious whatsoever, and call that out by name, I think that can help bring a lot of folks in. So hopefully that is helpful a little bit. If you'd like to hear more of my rantings, here are various places that you can find me, and I'm happy to answer any questions as always. After a break, yes.
Thank you, Aaron. That talk might not just get you a re-invite, that might actually get you to a strategy session. So we as Oasians are here to demonstrate some of our humanist values. As Aaron mentioned, our core values here. We have volunteer events coming up. We're going to be actually fixing up a home next week, and we go to the food bank regularly as well. We're going to do that. We also have a Pride booth coming up, so we need volunteers to help with some of the preparation this week. The details are in the newsletter or in the handouts that we gave out. And we also need volunteers for the Pride booth itself on June 29th. I believe it is, I see it, 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. We need volunteers at the booth to help us put our word out and to this fairly large audience.
Can I share one thing? Oasis is going to do the setup and the teardown. So we're going to be working earlier in the day.
Yeah.
Volunteers to do that. So if anybody's interested in being a part of that, doing the setup, we should start more around 9:45 or 10 a.m.
Oh, it says 7 a.m. here, but yeah, it says 7 a.m.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's early in the morning, so you won't have to get any sweaty. Just get it done, and you have a chance to enjoy the rest of the day at Pride. We also have other events coming up during the week. We have Blues Nights. We have Oasis Cards Group organized as well at homes. So please contact Richard Andrews for that. We have the book club. The book is Burial Rites by Hannah Kent. All right. Meanwhile, please take a 10-minute coffee break, and we'll be right back for questions with Aaron. Thank you. All right, everyone. We'll be doing a Q&A soon. You can write your questions down, or you can ask them when the mic comes to you. But first, we're going to do one song by Jes Schneider. I wanted to make sure that there's a clarification on the handouts you have. We're not going to the Mia's restaurant that's on there because it's closed today. We're instead going to go to Thien An restaurant, Vietnamese restaurant, which is 2611 San Jacinto Street. It's less than a mile away, so I think we've been there before, so we should be good. The Thien An, Thien and An. Yeah, Thien space An. 2611 San Jacinto Street. All right, take it away.
This next song's called 1,000 Miles of Texas. I wrote it back at the end of 2017. It's about my dad being down in Rockport during Hurricane Harvey. Stormy coast, the flags were seen with ripples. We found out they were in too deep. The sun was gone, the clouds were dark as nightmares, and in this soul is my family. 1,000 miles of Texas, 1,000 miles or more. Who's picking up the pieces? Yeah, they can be the only ones. They're far away from their sweet life, but they dream about what was. They're drowning down in Texas, far from who they love. From the storm, I know that nothing lasts forever. When will it end? We could only say. My daddy said he would be alright, but when I woke that night, I found out he was not okay. It was 1,000 miles of Texas, 1,000 miles or more. Was picking up the pieces, yeah, they can't be the only ones. They're far away from their sweet life, but they dream about what was. They're drowning down in Texas, we must tell them, don't give up. 1,000 miles, 1,000 miles, 1,000 miles or more. 1,000 miles, 1,000 miles, 1,000 miles or more. Hey, thank you.
Thank you, Jess. We'll do one song at the end as well. Mike's coming around. Charles is in the back getting questions. Please raise your hand and there. And go ahead.
Oh, okay. So recently we've done some surveys for here at Oasis, getting attendees to respond to what happened that day. And one of the things that we've learned is that some people come based on the topic for the day, but probably more of us come regardless of the topic for the day because we're here for the relationships. These are our people. These are people who understand us. From my background as a former Christian minister, and from what some sociologists are saying, that the church is the main sociological connector in our culture today. And I know that I can look at a church, ones that I served in, for example, and understand it the way I just described Oasis. There is a glue that is the religion, but maybe the real thing is the sociological connection. Simple math would tell us there are 2 million nuns, N-O-N-E-S, with a 1-hour drive of where we're sitting. So my question is, I mean, what do you think about all that? How do you respond to that, and what would you say about it?
Yeah, I think we live in a very sort of culturally impoverished modern world as a result of, and I'm writing a dissertation on this, so I'm not going to go too deep, but like as a result of capitalism, liberalism, and a variety of other things, we live in a radically individualistic world where people are deeply isolated from each other, full stop. And like the church, because of its long tradition, is one of the more resistant systems to that and sort of preserving that community, but it does it through a pretty harmful version of in-group, out-group behaviors, many of us are familiar. So because I think of the secular paradox and other things, individuals who leave those spaces don't necessarily feel comfortable finding another community because, broadly speaking, I think some of them just experience community as being tainted by religion in this kind of way. So, yeah, I think it is a challenge, it is an initial psychological challenge to overcome to help them see that this is what they need and that it's safe for them to come here and get that. Because, you know, cults, religions, they prey on people's need for community. And we are, I would argue, fundamentally very pro-social creatures. Some of us can live in the wilderness by ourselves and only commune with nature, but not most of us. Most of us, I think, need other people. And partly it's because this is a very care ethics, feminist sort of view of ethics, because your ethical experiences in life are dominated by caring reciprocal relationships. Because at many points in your life, you are going to be dependent. That's just the way that biology works. And by having these connections with your communities, like I was saying about, you know, maybe you don't want altruism. Maybe what you want is actually reciprocal community because altruism feels like a kind of obsessive self-sacrifice to an idea rather than making connections with other people. Now, I don't think everybody has to be in one big group. You and I were talking during the break about like, these groups probably cap out, like small churches, at around 100 people because that's about as much as humans can interact with. And that's fine as long as those communities, I think, work together with shared values to take that energy and build it up into political work as well, because we are really badly suffering under white Christian nationalism at the moment.
Thank you, Aaron, for your talk. Good that you put our values on a microscope and dissected. My question is about the second value, which you have. Reality is known through reason, and you mentioned that we have other ways of knowing reality, which is through intuition, experts, but how will you modify that core value? Because are we appealing to being unreasonable if you are not mentioning reason there? Because even appealing to intuition or experts, you're trying to be reasonable about it at the end of the day, don't you think?
Yeah, it's tricky, and I don't want to give like a sort of short answer to this because like branding matters. And ethics, is about persuasion as well as being right. And that is a phrase that I know people feel strongly connected to. And so before I would even want to like change it necessarily, I'd want to have a conversation with community stakeholders about like, what does this mean to you? How do you feel about it? And I would ask the community if there are thoughts about how they would see it changed or tweaked or expanded or shifted in some way or caveated. There, like, when you're making phrases, so this is the problem with like different goals of value statements. So what is a statement of values trying to really do for an organization? It's trying to get you from your mission statement, we're trying to do X, to your codes of conduct and policies. We're going to do X by, following these specific behaviors. And the values, like, sometimes they get pulled a little bit, I think, too much towards sloganeering or branding or something like that, where I don't think that they should, it's okay to have branding material separate from your values statement, but you might want your values statement to just be things like care and, fairness. And expert, like, to me, reasoning is known through, reality is known through reason is like, in our version, it's expertise, right? Reality is known through expertise, through a variety of kinds of expertise, including lived experience, phenomenological knowledge, but also reasoning. But that's, not as catchy, right? So maybe you want to have your statement of values be something like this, separate from your phrases for the community to understand broadly what you're into. Maybe it would be a matter of shuffling them around some, right? If it's, if the first and second ones are moved further down, then maybe they read more compassionately in the context of those other ones would be another. Like, again, this is the kind of thing that you want your community leaders to be sort of actively working through, rather than sort of, because, like, again, we don't want dogma, we don't want sacred cows, right? Including reason, right? There are a lot of good pushbacks on the atheist fixation on reason as a tool, a very effective but sort of one-noted tool for attacking religion. So, yeah, other things that I would suggest thinking about here are how action guiding is your actual statement of values. Does it make clear what it actually, I've read a lot of these from like corporations and things, and they mean nothing. They're just empty words. You need to be able to see clearly, like, people are more important than beliefs. What is that going to mean for your code of conduct? Does it mean that your code of conduct says you can be a part of our group no matter what your beliefs are, no matter how toxic they appear to be? We're still going to let you be a part of our community? Or does it mean we care about people, we're not going to be mean towards them, but we have red lines about what we're not going to allow into our community? So, just getting clear on stuff like that, I think, is what can help build that community space.
Thank you. Hi, this is my first time here. Thank you very much for your speech. It was super interesting.
Pleasure.
I have a question about something you mentioned very briefly about inclusivity, or I think you called it non-inclusivity. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to know if you have any research or if your peers have any research about kind of the demographics of atheists or non-believers, mm-hmm. and how those demographics play into the challenges of finding your people.
Yeah, absolutely. There is really good research on this by American atheists. They did, it's been a couple of years probably now that they did, I think, the largest national survey of non-believers, and then have spent the past few years breaking that out into like subtabs. So they released the big overall report, and then they released a report specifically about LGBTQ youth non-believers, and then one specifically about non-believers of color. And in each of those, they used a mix of quantitative analysis and qualitative, reporting from individuals to kind of give what I think is a really good picture. I would definitely recommend just checking out those surveys for starters. They're very readable, and they pretty much they were oriented towards assessing experiences of marginalization for non-believers. And so there's a lot in there about intersectional marginalization, that if you are LGBTQ or a person of color and a non-believer, you are more likely to experience marginalization for a variety of reasons. One being, for people of color, those communities have often very heavily centered around the church as their core system of fighting oppression, essentially. That is the strength of the community. And so those individuals express a greater experience of fear of immorality from them, from other people around them when they express that they are non-believers. They see them as tainted and a risk to the whole community because that non-believer could spread that belief that way, and that could undermine that core pillar of the community. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in there. American Atheists, yeah. Good nationalist organization, but also a bunch of state groups. Yeah.
Okay. In my view, one of the things that church has that almost all secular communities don't are rituals of passage, like birth, marriage, sickness, death,
Yep.
that serve an emotional purpose, as well as giving members a sense of feeling. And I was just wondering, are there any efforts or anyone working on maybe secular versions of rites of passage?
Yeah, I do think that work is out there, and I think this is really important because, like I said, I think ritual is important, and we are very anxious about it a lot of the time. I very lovingly remember when I was an undergrad, I took a class with E.D. Turner, who's the husband and co-worker, colleague of Victor Turner, who did a bunch of the original, what's called efficacy and performance work, which nowadays y'all will think of as like, if you do a ritual, it can influence you psychologically. It could make you feel happier or more interconnected, or you could gain insights from that ritual. So the ritual itself, separate from whether there's anything supernatural going on, can be an effective psychological mechanism. And I think that's absolutely true and a big part of human life. So as you pointed out, ritual is very good for marking transitions, right? It's important to mark when someone changes in a fundamental way or transitions to a different stage of life. It can lend meaning to those experiences. Ritual brings community together. Literally all of y'all just showing up in the room at the same time every week is, in my opinion, a ritual. Y'all have created a liminal space in which you are, and you are committing to, so part of ritual is commitment, right? I'm willing not just to make this change, but to show up consistently and do this ritual when we've all agreed to do it. I will make time for this, and that is a kind of commitment to your community that has really significant impact. As the community organizers in the room can tell you, getting bodies in the room consistently is difficult, and doing it has a positive impact if you can keep it going. It has a kind of snowballing effect. So yeah, I think the more we can look for secular rituals, and there is stuff like this out there, look to like modern secular mindfulness stuff that isn't on the woo end of the spectrum, and you'll find a lot of like secular ritual work for being present in the moment when something really important is happening, generating compassion and mindfulness through gratitude exercises or rituals like that. I think that's the sort of stuff, and that's very in keeping with our secular values. And expressing those values is the best way we can push back on marginalization, because it's all driven by the belief that we're bad people.
I had my hand up, didn't I? Maybe I was going to ask you about the expertise item in your list.
Yeah.
Because that's the one that just jumps off the page, and I think I don't know what it's doing there. The
Okay.
word respect, on the other hand, respect has a lot of meaning, but I don't understand.
Yeah.
Expertise doesn't fit into the rest within my understanding.
Sure, yeah, let me unpack that a bit more. And respect is another good core value, right? If you were going to put respect on your list of values instead of, so I use care because I'm an ethicist and I come from like a care ethics background, and I talk about compassion all the time because, as y'all learned last time, I have an obsessive need for everyone to be compassionate. But respect, like, by care and respect are very synonymous in a lot of ways. To be in a genuine, committed, reciprocal relationship with someone is to respect them. And like when we want to be respected, mostly what we mean is we want to be treated as an object of compassion and not something else that is worse. Okay, but what is expertise doing here? So here's how we explain this to creators when we do our creator trainings. Care and equity are our ends in themselves. That's your goals. That's what's got to win out, essentially, when there are conflicts between values, which unfortunately happens sometimes. We get there via allowing as much liberty as possible, up to a point, and by building trust. Communities run on trust. If I don't trust you, I'm not showing up, right? The people who hate people party never gets off the ground. So how do you build trust? We boiled it down to two things, and these are somewhat connected to what are called the moral foundation theory approach to values, which you might have heard of if you've ever heard of someone like Jonathan Haidt, though he doesn't, in my opinion, do a very good job with this material. The basic idea is we all have a kind of core set of shared values. These are, I think, better versions of what he calls things like loyalty and authority. So most people, to some extent, are deferential to authority, but what they really should care about is expertise. And so the way that integrity and expertise build trust is like this, right? We're a new organization. Inevitably, I would like y'all to trust us as an organization because we do the thing we say we're going to do it over time. That's what integrity means. Here are our values, here's how we're going to act, and then you do it. And if you do it for long enough, people are like, they probably actually believe that. But that takes time. So until we have that time, we have expertise. The idea being, for our organization, as we developed our system, we brought in experts who had best practices from all the different parts of things and used those best practices to inform our process. And again, expertise here, it's really important that that be understood more broadly than the meritocratic version of expertise that a lot of people think of today, which is basically being a coder. Expertise here means lots of different kinds of understanding. Community moderators, for example. We have several people in our organization who before this were just like taking care of Facebook groups. But that is a really, really important role within our communities, as anybody who has a social media presence for your organization knows. It can get real bad real fast if you don't have a good moderating team. And they developed special kinds of expertise and knowledge and understanding of our communities that you can't replicate without those experiences. So the idea here is your values, you want to be clear on how your values build and support each other and work together. So how does expertise allow us to get our foot in the door so that integrity can allow us to build trust over time so that we can actually help protect people? Because that's desperately all we want to do. Does that help? Clarify it a bit?
Frankly,
No.
no.
Fair answer.
But I can think about it.
Yeah.
So thank you.
So, I mean, here's another way to put it. None of you are going to become experts in 95% of the things that you believe because there's too much knowledge, trust me, right? So you're going to have to rely on experts. And if you don't rely on experts, you will not believe the things you need to believe, and you will have bad results. Yeah.
We have a new organization.
Yeah.
I think just since you were here.
Uh-huh.
Our board is fabulous, and it has built over these 10, 12 years. And there is expertise now on this board. People are, yeah, okay, I'm gonna try to take that word and of our board, because it has grown and tailored its positions. What it does, it's doing a really fabulous job. Yeah.
And the hallmark, if you're concerned about dogma and trying to distinguish between expertise and appeals to authority, the key difference is, can they explain themselves? An expert can explain it to you. You might not understand it, but they can explain it as long as you want to listen. All right? Some people will fake that, and there are a lot of unfortunate, like, cargo cult kind of approaches to expertise out there these days. Promoting conspiracy theories with giant piles of information. We know that conspiracy theorists and folks can do what looks like science when they compile a bunch of facts, but it's not the same thing. So It is hard to distinguish genuine expertise from fake expertise, but it is really, really important. And at the end of the day, it's really important to suss out good experts and rely on them. Through reason, through emotions, through intuitions. Yeah. We're good? Cool. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. That was a really great talk. We certainly got a lot to chew on. And I do not want to keep you from my bunny sandwiches. I just want to get a couple things going. We rely on our volunteers a great deal. It's a completely volunteer-run organization, and we're looking for help on several counts on the marketing committee, on the whether it is stacking up chairs at the end of the day, and there's so much going on in the background. I sat with a few of my volunteers to train them on social media postings and all that this week. So one more thing, Richard, would you like to come up as Jes sets up as well?
Yeah, hey folks, Rich Andrews. Don't forget we have a black hat, a lonely-looking black hat over there. If you are able to support Oasis in any way financially, that'll be helpful. We pay the musician, we pay speakers, we pay rent. If you're not able to give, that's fine. The most important thing is just you being here. We also have modern ways of giving. If you look at the back of your bulletin, it shows all the modern ways of giving, or at least 90% of the modern ways of giving. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Jes. Take it away.
Ain't the first time I've seen it, ain't the last time, I guarantee. And the way it works makes us feel so high. Yeah, the truth is, I'm in nature. It's the first time I felt these stars. If we break apart, we'll never know our see. There's smoke and breaks and waterfalls as if life was in a dream, a roller coaster, a difference in between. We talk about touring, getting out here around these streets, and talk about all the things we'll need. We talk about good times you might see us on TV, and talk about everything will be. All the good advice can seem so hard when we're going places slow. But if you don't endure, you'll never be set free. This war and strife can set us apart, and we wanna be so mean. But what if we break that bond, somehow it gets seen? We talk about touring, getting out here around these streets, and talk about things we'll need. We talk about good times. You might see us on TV. Talk about everything, everything will be. Hey! We talk about touring, getting out here on these streets. We talk about all the things we'll need. We talk about good times. You might see us on TV. We talk about everything, everything will be. Talk about everything, everything will be. We talk about everything, everything will be. Hey, thank y'all. I'm Jes Schneider. You can look me up, jesschneider.net. You guys have a good Sunday.
Thank you, Jess. That was some great performance. Thank you. Thank you, Aaron, for that great talk. And certainly, you're coming for that strategy session, right? All right, I just want to make sure everyone knows next week we have a couple things going on. We have a community moment that is going to talk about our impact report. One of our community members is going to talk about it, Emily Kremer. After that, we're going to have a lot of time to talk amongst ourselves in breakout groups. Tim's going to lead some of that conversation, and we're going to talk about how we've come to Oasis and all that. So let's not keep you from some banh mi at Thien An Sandwiches, and that's 2611 San Jacinto Street. Thank you.